Thanks for the welcome. It's my first time down here. I was really flattered when Chris asked me to come down because I'd heard about the conference, hadn't been here. Lived down in Montgomery for about 10 months when my wife was at the air base down there, and had driven through here, but I had never been here, so thanks for having me. So this talk is likely not going to be what you might have expected from a technical conference keynote. Got kind of a powerful story to tell. Excuse me. So I hope you stick around. I hope you get something out of it. So anybody having a bad day this week? Like struggles at work? Anybody having problems with Dave, that jerk Dave? Or somebody else?
Mine is actually named David.
Oh, the irony. Happens, right? You know, we have struggles with people. Anybody having problems with a relationship, struggling with your spouse, your significant other? I mean, it's human stuff, right? Things can even get a little worse. But the thing is that as humans, we are not going to lead lives free of adversity. And, you know, adversity sucks. It is no fun to go through struggles, but the thing is that adversity isn't always bad. There are a number of things, if we learn to just cope and get through adversity, that we can come out much better on the other side. So there's this really awesome poet, Buddhist monk lady that my sister turned me on to, Naomi Shihab Nye. And she's got this very interesting poem where she talks about, unless you have experienced dark, heavy things, you don't cherish the bright moments as much. And she's not the only person that's ever written about this. There's a lot of philosophy of the poems. I mean, my God, songwriters, particular genre, right, that talk about getting through struggles. I mean, that's pretty much like 98% of country music, right, is, you know, getting through struggles and adversity. And then, you know, there's also the good old adage, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I want to be very clear in this talk, I am not trying to throw out my stories as, oh, you think you got it bad, listen to what I had to go through. That's not the point. The point of this talk is to try to inspire you that getting through some adversity can get you to a really wonderful place, and they're just things you're going to have to deal with. I've also got a disclaimer. So I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a medical doctor, I don't do SharePoint. Anyway, you can read the whole thing, including like the 15-point or 8-point stuff down at the bottom. So, you know, things that I talk about may or may not work for you. You know, get some ideas, but make sure that things that I'm mentioning would fit with what lines up for you and what you are going through on yourself. So, again, we're humans. We can't avoid adversity. But the thing is that I think adversity helps us to actually bring out the best from us. And wine, and particularly wine grapes, actually has a good metaphor here. If you take a vineyard and you throw it on a flat plain in Belize where there's just this beautiful loam soil and it's hot sun and there's a whole lot of rain, those vineyards will just go crazy with growth. I mean, you've seen pictures of what the rainforest looks like, right? That's because everything grows there. Literally, seeds drop off of those trees in the rainforest, and 2 days later, they've sprouted, they've germinated, they're putting roots out. So a vineyard, you'd think, would be terrific down there. Well, it actually turns out wine grapes don't work that way. If you want strong, big, powerful grapes that produce like wines, you need to do something like this, which is plant your vineyards in rocks on the side of a valley. This is actually in the Rhone area of France, southern France, and it's known for just this barren, almost Martian-like landscape. And the thing is, those grapes, the rootstock, the part that shoots the roots down, struggle for years to force their roots down through the soil, sometimes reaching as far as 80 feet down into the soil to find that water, to find the nutrients, to find the minerals. And the result is an extraordinarily big, powerful wine. That's not always the kind of wine that I like to drink, but it's a metaphor. So just go with it, all right? So the thing is, be it plants or humans, we have to build a solid foundation. And again, going back to yet another plant metaphor, when you take a look at trees in the hurricanes, yes, some trees get blown off, but on the other hand, some trees that survive even Category 5 hurricanes deal with those huge winds. How? Because they've put down an amazing foundation. They've got a powerful base from which to get through that struggle, that storm. Anybody know Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I see a number of heads out there and a few folks waving around. So if you're not familiar with Maslow, he was a psychologist, scientist, philosopher who came up with this very fascinating hierarchy of human needs. And the idea is that unless you have the lower level needs fulfilled, you can't even think about more kind of inspirational, broader things, right? And the very first part of that is, am I secure? Do I have a house? Or do I have a roof over my head? Am I living out in the elements, right? Physical security, safety. Do I have a job? Can I feed my family? Can I feed myself? And we have to think of those things, those bare root survival things, before we can ever start to think of, man, you know what, this job sucks and I'd like to improve my skills so that I can go find something better, or I want to get involved with community help, right? We can't think about any of those things higher up the hierarchy, further up the pyramid, like self-actualization, where I'm really internalizing, what it is I want to be when I grow up. We can't take care of any of that unless we've got a solid base. So that means, do I have shelter? Do I have some place to live? Do I have some level of financial security, both in regular income as well as an emergency fund? I'm not trying to go all Dave Ramsey and Sue Zorman here, but in my story, one of the biggest things that's been a help for me the last few years is we had spent a number of years building up a significant emergency fund so that when my life fell apart, I didn't have to worry about going back to work the next day. And that's a huge thing, because when we can build up those most fundamental things, then we can start to move on to the next stages, which would be things like taking care of our own mental health. And this is something that we don't talk about. Thankfully, the IT community is a little more open to talking about mental health, but still, it kind of makes people a little uncomfortable. But the thing is, if we start to learn a bit about how our own brains work and how we can deal with certain situations, that's helping us build up that foundation so that when something bad does happen, we're in a better spot there. And the thing is that we humans are wired up, literally, physically and mentally, we're wired up to avoid uncomfortable situations. So in the last year and a half, I've had a lot of opportunity to research around how the human body deals with pain. And there's a very interesting school of medicine led by a doctor in the Netherlands, Adrian Lau. And they have come to find, this is actually some new discovery in the last 5 to 10 years, that the brain goes to extraordinary lengths to protect your body from pain or discomfort. And the thing is that the brain will actually escalate far past what you're actually feeling. So if you imagine that you've got, say, a bad wound that runs down your neck and kind of across your chest, there's a lot of muscle in this area. There's also a couple very critical nerves here. One of those nerves comes down across the chest. It also branches off and covers both sensing and controlling of muscles in the face. So if you have an injury to this area, that's pretty significant. So you have a bad wound there, and wounds take time to heal, right? The body's trying to knit the skin back together. It's trying to take those muscles that have been severed and grow them back together. The body wants you to take it easy in that area. So if you've got a wound and you're moving something around, it's a little uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's the nature of it. You have a wound there. It's going to be uncomfortable. But the thing is, the brain will try to protect that area by going to the extreme of sensing that there's some discomfort there. And if you don't literally focus your brain that this discomfort is normal and it's part of the healing process, your brain will go off in a crazy direction. And the brain will take that discomfort and it'll actually drive it up to where you start sensing pain. It's not discomfort, right? Discomfort, it's a little sore. Well, you have a big wound there. It will take and move that sensation up to pain because the brain is trying to be very protective of this whole area. And if you continue, to not work with your brain will move from pain over to danger. So they have found actually that even things like light pressure on this area, wearing clothing, wearing jewelry, somebody touching here, will set off extraordinary reactions that are far beyond what you'd expect from that one bad wound. To the point where there's a situation called hypersensitivity, and light clothing on a wound area can become extraordinarily painful. That sensitivity and that sense of pain can expand and travel over to other areas, such as the other side of the body. So that somebody touches you on this shoulder, you had a wound here, you get a shooting pain. So there's all kinds of other things around this, right? My point being that you have something going on, your brain is trying to protect against whatever that situation is, and your brain will magnify over from uncomfortable, it's painful, to it's dangerous and something bad is going to happen. We can take that same idea and see that not only is it physical, but sort of mental uncomfort. The brain will do the same thing. Oh, God, Dave makes me uncomfortable. I don't want to deal with him. Not you, the other Dave. We start to take and develop avoidance of those uncomfortable situations. And the brain will take over and make that worse and worse and worse. But the thing is, you can exercise your brain such that you learn to cope with those things. You can learn to deal with anxiety. You can learn to deal with anger situations. It's a matter of learning tools. You can learn to deal with even much more significant things such as depression. So a number of years ago, I turned type 1 diabetic. So I've got an insulin pump that hangs off my belt here, gives me a little slow drip of insulin to help me control my blood sugar. Diabetes type 1 usually manifests with young kids, like pre-adolescent. So the majority of it is like infants to like 5 or 8 years old. That's when diabetes type 1 mostly manifests itself. A few post-adolescents, a few folks in their 20s will get it. I won the lottery at age 46. Don't know why. That's a lottery I really wouldn't have liked to win. But diabetes is extraordinarily life-changing. If you're a diabetic, you know about what I'm talking about. Maybe you know somebody who is. Changes your lifestyle, changes their eating habits, and it also impacts those around you because, when you've got to change your own eating habits, that means the rest of the family has to at least be respectful of that. So when this happened 8 years ago, I was not in a good place at home. Work was really tough. I was having a lot of difficulty with my wife and our relationship, and I started to spiral into depression. What was missing was I didn't have tools, didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know who to reach out to. And that spiral continued worse and worse and worse. So 8 years ago, I didn't have this fancy pump. I just had these little pens that you hook a needle onto and you stick it in around your stomach and shoot up your insulin as you need to. So insulin is one of the most powerful hormones in your body. So the insulin's job is to basically eat up sugar that's in your blood. So your blood sugar gets up really high, you have to inject some insulin, try to bring it back down to normal. If you have too much insulin, then your blood sugar goes from normal down to a scary place where there's not enough sugar in your bloodstream, and the body starts to cut off blood sugar to your brain because it's trying to go into survival mode and keep the rest of you alive. So as your blood sugar starts to drop, you get fuzzy, you get confused, and if your blood sugar continues to drop, if you've got way too much insulin, you can actually go into a coma. And if you have more insulin than that, you can die. It's dangerous stuff. So the thing is, I was in a really, really bad spot. Wasn't getting help at home. Things were actually being made worse. I was part of that. And it got to the point where I was thinking, all I had to do is just take that pen, dial it up, shoot it up, done with the pain. To be clear, when I say done with the pain, I mean I'm dead. Scary stuff. But the universe, if you're open to it, throws across moments of grace. I was in this bad spot, was driving in the car listening to NPR, which I don't do very often, and they had this interview with a guy who was a social worker at a suicide center for teens and adolescents. I have no idea why I was listening to this show, it just came on. And here I was in a funk, driving around town, literally looking at my insulin pens, thinking about killing myself. And this guy said the kids he was most worried about were the ones with a plan, who had visualized. Holy shit, that's me. That was the wake-up call that I was lucky to get, because immediately, within a week, I had reached out and gotten some help. I found a great therapist, and that therapist helped walk me through learning to cope with the situation that I was in. So you talk about that Maslow pyramid, right? She was helping me build up tools that took care of my survival, the most fundamental level. Learning how to deal with some of the stress, learning how to set boundaries so that I was able to take care of myself. But the thing was that getting that help, she didn't want me just to cope, she wanted me to actually thrive. So we worked on some of these tools over the course of several months. We did some other things, wasn't getting the results that she thought I could get. So it's time to turn to some medication. Again, with mental health in our culture, we don't tend to talk about this, but I was on antidepressants for a number of years. And it helped, it got me from that cope up to being able to thrive in an environment that I didn't have much control over. So the thing is, I learned to deal with some really extraordinary stress. I'd learned some tools, I'd gotten some help. I had built that foundation. Has anybody here seen the movie Riddick? Couple hands. Okay, so it's a science fiction movie. It's this anti-hero movie. In the latest movie, third of a trilogy, he has what he calls a legendary bad day. And it's part of his own narration of the movie. Basically, he's been marooned on this planet. He was thrown off a cliff. He's got a compound fracture. He's got nothing to survive with. And he says, oh, and the actor is Vin Diesel. So he's got this really crusty voice here, and he's talking about having a legendary bad day. Well, so all of that, excuse me, got some acid reflux that gives me some problems with my esophagus. I don't have zombie grunge or anything. So dealing with all of those struggles, bad work, depression, suicidal tendencies, got me through to a point where all of that was solved and I had a solid base. So that was 8 years ago, right? And had no other issues that were anywhere near that bad. But it's a good thing. Because the universe was not done. 10th of January, 2017, my 12-year-old son woke up and killed my wife. He also attacked my 16-year-old daughter. Cut her badly. Fractions of a millimeter from her jugular. So here I am. Talk about a bad day. But the thing is that experience that I had, that foundation that I built up, let me get through that terrible spot. Let me move through. And you know, it's interesting. When things fall apart, you really start to focus on what the most important things are. And so I had a whole bunch of logistical things. I was actually in Michigan. We live in Oregon, so I wasn't even at home when this happened. Had to deal with airlines trying to get back home in emergency fashion. I screwed up. I trusted American Airlines. Of course, they lost my bags and got me diverted, and it took me a day and a half to get home instead of an easy trip, but I was able to focus on what was really important, which was getting back to my daughter. So when adversity hits, back to Maslow's pyramid, do you have that foundation? First, survive. Get through the mechanical things, get through the daily stuff. But then you can start to grow out, you can start to find how to move forward and get past that just coping part. And one of the things I found is that, friends are great, but friends also suck. And what I mean by that is, when this happened, the day of, my texts blew up, the internet blew up, got a huge amount of support. And people had no idea how they could help. I mean, Jesus Christ, what do you do? So I'd have friends say, man, whatever you need. And some months later, as I was getting out of the worst of this, I started to do things like I finally finished a book that I'd written and was looking for help publicizing the book. And, I'd reach out to people and say, hey, can you help me just retweet this or do something else? I asked some people for help with work. I got 0 responses. And I don't mean this as, oh my God, those people are awful. But what I'm trying to say is when you are in a bad spot, sometimes you can't rely on folks that you thought you could. And that's just life. They're not bad people, right? They're busy with their own things. And dear God, I still love all those friends. But what balanced us off was finding grace and blessings in places I never expected. The community reached out and did this extraordinary GoFundMe effort that helped me not worry about bills for months. And there were people that contributed to that I know where they are in their career space. They gave me like their month's lunch money. Holy cow, that's pretty extraordinary. When you are in bad spots, be open to small little things that you didn't expect. We've had any number of people cross our paths. My daughter has extraordinary mental health professionals. She's got extraordinary physicians that are helping her deal with her injuries. We found a support dog for her at the local animal shelter who turned out to be just brilliant. When you are in an awful spot, grace, blessings, and help will come from places you don't expect. I talked about having that solid foundation after having dealt with depression and other things. And that got me to a good spot to be able to deal with this mess. But again, still need help, right? When things get really bad, don't fear reaching out. And if you're around someone who is struggling, step up to the plate and help them move in the right direction. If you are struggling, get active. Isolation. We can talk about being introverts all we want, and that's okay. But when you are down in the dumps, spending a year in the garage on your Xbox is not going to be great help for you. I may or may not have done some of that. I'm fortunate in that, in the worst of things, I didn't have to deal with addiction. So in January, it was all logistical stuff. Get funerals lined up, get memorials lined up, take care of insurance, blah, blah, blah. It was just horrible tasks. Into January, I got through all of that stuff, and now it was just time to actually start coping. It's February and March, I drank 30 liters of gin, vodka, excuse me, I drank 30 liters of gin, vodka, all kinds of spirits. I think I went through 4 cases of wine. I have no idea how much beer I drank. There was a lot of it. And oh, by the way, all of that was after 9 o'clock at night when my daughter went to bed, because I had to take care of her. It was pretty extraordinary, and it was a little scary. But when April came around, I poured out every last drop of alcohol in the house. I'm fortunate because I know lots of other people aren't able to walk away from stuff that easily. And if you're one of those folks who has issues with addiction or whatever, when things are bad, you absolutely have to have that solid base where you can get the right kind of help to get through it. There's a really great school of psychology and psychiatry for troubled teens called dialectic behavior theory, or therapy, DBT. And they've got this wonderful mantra that has really been a good thing for me. And I think it's helpful for a lot of people. And the mantra is, you're doing the best you can, but do a little better. I find that fascinating because it acknowledges that when you are struggling, you're lost. But this encouragement of do a little better is a really powerful notion. So, God, I've been in bed for 2 weeks. Do a little better. Just get out of bed today. Go brush your teeth. Small things, if you can repeat doing them, lead to slightly bigger things. Lead to slightly bigger things. If you can, with help or by yourself, whatever, do a little better. That helps you move through that adversity. It helps you get through that and build a pattern. Spirituality is critical. And I say spirituality because not everyone is religious. I'm a Christian, I attend church infrequently, but that's kind of been some of my grounding, but that's not the only thing that can help. I've got a number of people who are very spiritual but not religious. The point being, whether it's religion, whether it's spirituality, whether it's meditation, if you can learn to work with some of this, it helps give you some of that grounding, a sense of place. All of these horrible things are happening, Why is the universe doing this to me? Well, it's not that the universe hates you, stuff just happened, right? But spirituality can help you persist through those terrible things. It may surprise you, but for an entire year, I was pretty numb. And I talk about having a dead heart and a soul full of actions. And literally would drive the half hour from my house to see my son in the county seat. And I have no idea how I got there. I don't think I ran anybody over. Don't think I ran off the road, but it was numbness. And finally, some months ago, I realized, wow, I'm not numb anymore. And I realized, as things wore off, how powerful a sense of gratitude I had and how helpful that was to me. Folks in the community who had lifted me up, folks in my local community who'd helped. Finding that dog for my daughter, which was life-changing. acknowledging grace and blessings that you get from others helps you heal yourself and helps you get through those worst parts of life. I've got a good friend who is going through some pretty epic struggles himself, and his own little mantra is, man, when you're struggling, help somebody else or pet a dog. The point being that being grateful for what you've got, even if it's bad, helps you focus outward. And that's a big thing. And a sense of forgiveness. We can't go through life holding on to rage and outrage and this lust for retribution and justice, unless it's around SharePoint, then that's okay. But learning to forgive is critical for helping move through those bad times, because if all you're focused on is sort of the dark side, then you're going to end up getting thrown down like some kind of big chute by Vader. Bad joke, sorry. So the thing is, adversity happens. You can't avoid it. Dear God, I hope nobody has to go through anything close to what I've gone through. But the point is that you're always going to have to face adversity of some kind. And frankly, the thing is, this is how we grow as humans. Right? Can I get through this bad space so that I'm better prepared for the next thing, and I'm better prepared for the next thing? The thing is that each and every one of you has the ability to deal with whatever it is that you're struggling with. Find those tools, create that base, get the right kinds of help. There's very little that we humans can't get through. It sucks. We shouldn't have to. It's life. So, kind of the whole point of my little talk here is not just, again, relating this "oh, woe is me" story. That's not my point. It's graphic. It's pretty intense. Likely not what you expected when you walked in here. Oh, by the way, my talk tomorrow is much less intense. Like, I rag on SharePoint. I got a picture of a flaming outhouse and like kids on trikes. So my talk tomorrow is much lighter if you're interested. But rather, what I'm trying to pass on to you is that through my experiences, maybe you can get some inspiration yourselves on dealing with things that are coming across the paths in your life. Thank you.